Hey YouTube, welcome back to Love for Crypto. So today first, as we all know, it is SWELL. Before we do start to go into depth on that topic, I just want to go back to, I think it was Thursday, I might have spoke about Ryan Zigone up at Capitol Hill. Obviously since that video we have seen a lot of media circulating. So just to clarify some of those things, obviously Ryan Zigone basically gave a pitch, if you want to call it, to Congress, basically stating, you know, the US need to do something literally right now in regards of clarity on regulations in order for them to still remain relevant. As we can see, other countries, great example for it, Japan, are well in with regulations now. Obviously we've seen SBI and what they plan on using blockchain technology for moving forward for their banking enterprise, consortium of 65 plus Japanese banks moving on to RippleNet, which has been made possible due to regulation clarity over in that nation. So since that, obviously we spoke about that on my video anyway on Thursday, but it is nice to see it actually circulating around and a lot of people getting tweets out for it. But you know, Congress have basically stated to the SEC, CFTC, that they need clear regulation around digital assets in regards of what is security, currency, commodity, and so forth. And I think it has been put top of the agenda. Since that, you know, obviously I spoke about that on Thursday for you all, because I think it went a little bit unnoted, but obviously as we've seen over the weekend, it has spiralled out now, this sort of talk, which I'm glad to hear, because it was really key, really, to be fair. I mean, without regulations, we are not going to see growth to a level what we are expecting to see. And a very interesting thing has happened since then. Donald Trump has issued an executive order to the Treasury Department on a 120-day basis. Basically, they've got 120 days to make amendments to financial laws. Now, I can't really, off the top of my head, remember the exact sort of specific set of laws. There is a name for it. It's typical when you make a video, it fucking you lose your concentration and you sort of lose grasp of the word. But anyway, just to make it, just to reiterate on what it was. I mean, for this for me is massive. In my opinion, I am directly linking this to blockchain and cryptocurrency. It's basically, in 2008 there was a set of standards put in position. I think it might have been from the Obama sort of era, if you want to call it that. Again, there's another fucking word I forgot. But anyway, basically this is going to allow banks to be more, let's call it less sort of pressure on top of them, if you want to call it that, for investments. Basically, you know, there's been a lot of restrictions been put in place for US banks since 2008, which has restricted their, if you want to call it, broadness of investment range of what they can invest into. Now again, as I have stated previously before, that regulations, Ryan Zigone has basically hit out at Congress stating, you know, if the US wants to remain relevant like it did during the internet boom, you know, the internet of information, if you want to call it that, the dot-com era, it was actually Bill Clinton himself who put forward to the UN, the G20, for e-commerce regulatory framework to be put into position. And as we can see, the US have really fallen behind on that. Living here in the UK, there's more certainty here. If you go to Japan, I think it's extremely clear what the regulation stance is there on crypto and digital assets, whereas in the US it is falling behind. Now again, I have stated this in previous videos. I think last year when we had that bull run, you know, an 880 billion market cap, I think might have been the top, and that doesn't get unnoticed. You know, make sure you're well aware that, you know, when an asset class And bear in mind, we've not seen another asset class since stocks was created. You know, we're probably talking a couple of centuries ago was the last birth of a new asset class. But as we can see with digital assets, this is definitely becoming a new asset class in its own. And we do need that regulatory clarity around everything in order for it to grow, in order for innovation to continue, and more importantly for the US to remain relevant in this up and coming, you know, technological revolution, which it 100% is. You know, make no mistakes about that whatsoever. And I think Ryan's going to put it across very well to Congress. And by the sounds of it, Congress have you know, initially reacted to it. You know, the SEC, they want clarity now, Congress. It's not something the SEC can just sit on. I perfectly believe, as we were saying, with the 880 billion market cap, you know, there would have been people on Wall Street who was probably thinking, you know, what the hell is this? You know, it's been under the radar for so long. Wall Street didn't have the hands in it. Silicon Valley certainly didn't have a stake in it, if you want to call it that. And you know, as we've seen all this year, we've seen complete utter FUD spread worldwide. You know, whether it's from China, whether it was from CoinMarketCap removing Asian markets, whether it was Bill Gates coming out and saying he'd short Bitcoin, or you know, I could go on and go on. You know, if you've been following this for a year, you know, MasterCard, Visa banning crypto, we've heard it all. You know, they made it well aware to, you know, the untrained eye, if you want to call it that you know, this was a fad. Yeah, it was a phase, blew over. And I think the SEC have also played a key role in this, especially if you watch my documentary and you fully understand who the deep state are, you know, with Wall Street and Silicon Valley, you know, obviously central banks, Federal Reserve. The SEC falling under that branch as well. It's 100% certainty. And what they've done is obviously they've held and they've lingered this security over XRPZ all year. And I believe that has been a suppression for the price movement of Ripple. I believe if the markets was left to be an open, free market, you know, not manipulated in any way, shape or form, I don't think we would have seen a 93% pullback from the all-time high. I think that is absolutely, I mean, don't get me wrong, you know, throughout history, we do see pullbacks like that. I mean, Amazon's a great example. In the 90s, went from $3 to $116, back down to $6. Everybody wrote it off. Everybody called Bezos crazy for his idea and his innovation. And, you know, and look how that actually did turn out to go against every single one of his critics. The same goes for XRP, but I do believe we have been pressured 100% to the downside. As you can see, you know, we've got BATS that's launching in November. We've got talks of BlackRock wanting to do custodian services, JP Morgan, Citibank, and you know, listen, with all the FUD that's happened, we know it was articulated, it was 100% manifested in a way to benefit certain players in this environment, and it was basically a slaughter of the middle class, if you want to call it that. You know, all these people first to this open market. With no restrictions, unlike, you know, if you want to go and you know, invest in stocks, you have to use a brokerage. You know, it's always the big boys that are first in on the pile. But you know, this time round, for the first time in history, I'd like to say, it's been the everyday man that's had to be able to get a piece of the pie, if you want to call it that, before, you know, Wall Street come in. And this is exactly why these markets have been played down. It's 100% crystal clear in my eyes, and I believe this now is all being articulated again. I think we're going to get that decision from the SEC before year's end. We've got Donald Trump that's issued out a 120-day executive order aimed at the Treasury Department, and here we go, just wait for this. It's going to be a rewriting of financial laws that's going to allow less pressure and less restrictions for banking investments, as we've seen in 2008 due to the subprime mortgages, and how banks, you know, shorted down that market as a profit. Restrictions was made, but those are about to be lifted, and it is the likes of JP Morgan who is going to be sat at this table rewriting these laws. You know, the bankers, we know the power of the bankers. It's the bankers ultimately that do rule the world, and yet again, just like we did see in Bretton Woods, it will be the bankers again that will be rewriting these legislations. Now, I know it's not in comparison to Bretton Woods, as obviously that was at the end of World War II, where we didn't have a world currency. You know, that is completely different. But the moral of what I'm actually trying to get at, yet again, it is the bankers who will be there. We will be writing these legislations. But I believe this is in direct response to Ryan Zigone in Capitol Hill and Congress. I think Congress have been made well aware how extremely important it is for the US to act now and not just keep sitting on this innovational, revolutionary technology, because it's not stopping for nobody. You know, the US can try and they can try and pressure it as much as they want, but it is a worldwide phenomenon, which, you know, the US isn't everything in the world, is probably the best way of putting it. Although it would be absolutely a key sort of, if you want to call it, a key thing for the US to be acting in this space. I make no question about it. The US aren't stupid. The SEC have pressured this market down for specific reasons, for specific people to be able to obtain assets. Just like we've seen with Bitcoin, with the CBOE futures that started last November. As soon as this started, we've seen paper contracts, derivatives being used to suppress the physical price or spot price of an asset. So they've done this. Wall Street have shorted it. They've got out on open books. They've played down the market. They've been profitable on the futures contracts, and they've also been profitable because they've been able to obtain the physical asset at a much cheaper spot price. And another thing is, you know, all these moves that Ripple and XRP are making, you know, it's complete media blackout. Nobody's hearing nothing about it. And so I'd like to say people who need to be involved are involved now. They probably have got the bags loaded, if you want to call it that. But I think we've definitely seen a sentimental change in the way that this market is moving now, and I do believe we've turned the corner of the bear market. I believe that era is over now. I think obviously that 25 cents bottom, and we've been bullish ever since. Now, obviously we've had a great sort of past 3-4 weeks, maybe I'd say, leading up till SWELL. Now we're at SWELL today again. It's a difficult one, this. I'm not trying to hype anybody up for it, but you just got to look at the speakers who were there this year. It is different than last year in respect of high-profile members. You've got Bill Clinton, who's going to be opening up with the initial speech. And I believe you've got a very high personnel from the IMF who's sat there. You know, we've got head figures of central banks. This SWELL is about being connected. Now, I'm not trying to say announcements will be made or XRP will be announced live there. I don't believe that is the case. But I think we will be getting some extremely bullish news from this year's version of SWELL. Whereas last year, banks wasn't interested in digital assets themselves. There was more interest in blockchain. And that's what Ripple have done. You know, they've got banks, they've gave them the confidence, they took them from the old infrastructure and they put them onto RippleNet, you know, ex-current. And as we said from this channel months and months ago, it's never a bad thing, a bank joining onto ex-current. You know, we've had everybody, you know, outside of XRP community saying they don't want to use the coin, they just want to use the blockchain, the technology. Now, of course, you know, uneducated people will have seen that as, you know, possibly FUD. It probably worked on a lot of them. But the problem is, and the issue what Ripple have been trying to do is, you know, they've got over 120 clients in production phase on ex-current. And we've seen exactly now with multi-hop exactly what that means. You know, the way I've always liked to say it is, well, Ripple have been building the motorways and the freeways, if you want to call them, if you're in the US, with ex-current, getting banks onto blockchain technology. Then the initial, you know, the final change onto the digital asset is not the hard job. You know, that is literally the case of a flick of the switch, where they can have, rather than settling through fiat with ex-current, they can settle with XRapid whilst using ex-current. You know, we're going to see the divergence of all the Ripple products come together. And, you know, I know we've heard about ex-current, XRapid, XVIA, but I do believe moving forward it will just be RippleNet now. You know, whether you put onto ex-current, you still have that chance to settle with XRP. Whether the jurisdiction laws in your specific nation, you know, do not allow the trading of digital assets, then there is going to be an intermediary bank that will take on the XRapid role. meaning that anybody across the world, you know, worldwide, whether they're ex-current, ex-VIA, you know, they can have the benefits of XRP still, regardless whether the jurisdiction that they are in allows the, you know, the holding or the exchange of digital assets in banking flows. It's great, absolutely great news. And obviously we've got SWELL. I'm looking forward to SWELL. I'm not expecting nothing major left to drop off it, although I could be wrong. You know, Mutual Loop got announced last year. And then obviously, you know, all banks were saying last year they're interested in the blockchain and not the digital asset. Well, I believe this year we're going to see a very, very, the quite complete opposite. I think this year will be based on using digital assets for that extra potential saving, the transparency, the speed, the settlement, and of course to aid companies, especially small to medium-sized businesses, you know, that can't operate worldwide due to Nostro accounts being very expensive. You know, it's a new form of liquidity, you know, a new age of liquidity now, and you know, again, I think in time, you know, whether it take 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, I think we will definitely see XRP acting as a world reserve. Acts as a reserve before that, but there's just too many nations now, including the European Union, China, Russia. They're all wanting to move away from SWIFT. The narrative is being set now. If you can read between the lines geopolitically, the narrative is well and truly being set now for the death of SWIFT and for the death of the US dollar acting as that reserve. You know, we are being painted that picture now on mainstream media, which to me does seem like we're getting that extra little bit closer to it. Again, we're not going to see nothing about, you know, you're not hearing nothing about, well, in fact, I tell a lie. We're actually seeing big banking analysis come out now about the financial crisis. And there is something very interesting that I do want to bring up. Obviously, Gregory Mannarino, if you did watch the documentary, he's a person you want to be following to keep in line with how you know, markets are on a worldwide scale, not just crypto. We're talking, you know, about bonds, equities, stocks. On Wednesday, the Federal Reserve increased rates by 25 basis points, which is 0.25%. But the funny thing is, after the Federal Reserve raised, you know, they made the announcement that rates was being raised, and on the same day, rates actually decreased. They actually decreased. Now, you've got to ask yourself this. The Federal Reserve increased rates, but then on the 10-year yield, those rates that should have been increased actually fallen. Now, don't forget, obviously, it's going to be the likes of the Federal Reserve that are, you know, pumping this cash flow into the bond market, which is then going to filter into the stock market. What you're seeing in this market, none of it makes sense anymore. And the reason it doesn't make sense is because of the deficits that we have. We have the debt currency, the debt crisis. We have the emerging market currency contagion that's starting. And believe me, the disaster is around the corner. Make no mistake about that. You know, the way things are going at the moment is going to be catastrophic to end. And I believe most people analysing this market probably believe exactly what I am saying. You know, the bond market is being propped up by the Federal Reserve. It's all fake. The buying that you're seeing in the stock market at the moment is from government printing. It really is. You know, it's not a free open market anymore. It's completely manipulated. And I believe just because of the debt crisis, because of the currency crises that are unfolding, you know, we've got that yield, the 10 to 3 year yield inversion that's being managed to prevent that from crossing over. There's so many things that are going on. And one way that, you know, a lot of the pressure could be taken away from emerging markets, and a lot of pressure being taken away from the strong dollar, which is rising, which in turn is then creating a knock-on effect in emerging markets. You know, with the SWIFT system and 65% of world trade running through SWIFT, the only way we can stop and prevent a catastrophic event is, you know, by ushering in a new form of world reserve, a new form of liquidity that's not dependent on the US dollar. And in turn, obviously, when the dollar's rising, it's not creating that knock-on effect against emerging markets like Turkey and Argentina and all of the other ones. And I believe we'll come to a point in the next year and a half by Q4 2019. You know, this doomsday scenario we will face it head on, and I believe the IMF have got the trick up the sleeve personally. I really do. And you know, the way that SWIFT, everyone keeps talking about how SWIFT's going to die. What is going to replace SWIFT? It's going to be Ripple now. It's going to be XRP being used as liquidity. Now, during this crisis that we are going to experience, you know, liquidity will have dried up. You know, quantitative tightening by the Federal Reserve is already making sure of that. And I believe it's going to be put across, you know, to G20, to the United Nations, whilst being seated with the IMF and all the central banks. A new monetary system will be needed in order to prevent chaos in the streets across the globe. You know, it's not affecting us here, but it is the type of scenario that will affect the world. You know, supermarkets won't be able to make deliveries, meaning there'll be no food in stores. You'll see a mad rush for it. It will be riots, and it's this type of scenario where maybe the unthinkable could be used and be put forward. And I do believe it. I really do genuinely believe its purpose was designed for it. I think XRP will step in, and it will take a bit of the pressure off those emerging markets, maybe start as a reserve currency, not the world, but I think as over time. I mean, listen, Donald Trump's, if you can read between the lines again, you know, that even level playing field. Listen, US dollar acting as the world reserve is not an even playing field, believe me. You've got huge deficits on the US side of things, you know, complete trade deficits, and then you've got emerging markets currencies which are just currently plummeting through the floor. And again, this is all due to the fact of the US dollar acting as that world reserve. So I think that's something to look forward to over the next 18 months or so. It really is. And as far-fetched as that may sound, you know, all you've got to ask yourself is, why is the Federal Reserve got Ripple, you know, Chris Larsen, Ryan Zigone, you know, at the Federal Reserve faster payments task force? They're seated there. They're looking to initiate that by 2020, where we'll be able to interface with blockchain technologies as a form of, you know, intermediary settlement. And we've got the same with the Bank of England. The exact same with the Bank of England, and the exact same year, 2020. Listen, to think that we are not currently in an economic meltdown just because it's not apparent to where we live, it is 100% the gospel truth. It is happening as we speak. It just does not look apparent yet. And you have the likes of the Federal Reserve propping up the bond market by printing money, which is then being filtered into the US stock market, making things look okay in the US, but it's really not the case. The dollar's getting stronger. This is the exact same opposite to what President Trump will want. He'll want the weaker dollar. But as people are flocking and fleeing the emerging market currencies, you know, Argentine peso, they're going directly into the US dollar. And as you can see, this knock-on effect, it's just unsustainable. There's been too many economic figures worldwide that are calling out this now. And we're even seeing drizzles of it in mainstream media publications now, from the likes of JP Morgan analyst, to mention one of very few people. So I'm definitely prepared for that. But I believe if you're watching this channel and XRP, you are already hedged against this. You know, paradigm shift is the best way of calling it. It is going to become the end of the US dollar reserve status, just as it did do with the pound sterling. But I don't believe it's going to involve a war this time. I think, you know, this trade war is doing enough damage to make it completely apparent that we do need a new form of world reserve. And again, we've got the ECB calling on this now. We've got China, we've got Russia, and I think it's all been articulated into a way to look as it is appearing to do so. But make no mistake about it, this has been an ongoing thing for the past few decades, and I think we're coming to the final point of it. In the 80s, in '89 crash, no interest rates were around 20%, and ever since then we've seen interest rates drop and drop and drop and drop and drop. You know, to combat, you know, the cycle of a recession. You know, they say every 10 years you should have a recession, and with every time doing so, they have dropped rates in order to get the market to create support for the market to bounce off, and then that would be the end. But the difference this time, you know, bear in mind, after 2008, rates have been dropped to near zero. There is nowhere rates can go now. The Federal Reserve, the central banks, they have run out of ammunition to keep propping up recession after recession, and I do believe we're coming to to the end of a monetary sort of establishment. You know, that's been here since 44, 45, I believe Bretton Woods was, when the US dollar became the world reserve, you know, backed by gold, and then we had Nixon who removed that in the 70s. But it's very interesting to watch over. Again, we've got SWELL, we've got people from the IMF, we've got people from the central banks, we've got President Clinton speaking on behalf of Ripple, and we know that wouldn't be cheap. We've also got talks about cryptocurrencies, you know, for example, Ripple lobbying congressmen and paying with XRP, you know, to maybe push regulation through. And don't forget Donald Trump's executive order. That blew my mind. You know, people probably call out in this video saying it's got nothing to do with cryptocurrencies, but I assure you right now, the only reason we need, you know, and bear in mind, Ryan Zigone has been going around the world, you know, talking about this new regulatory framework, and the US are falling behind in this executive order from Donald Trump aimed at the Treasury with the aid of a few high-level banking partnerships with JP Morgan. Will be obviously doing some of that underwriting. Make no mistake about it, you know, this is 120 days. We should have financial clarity, you know, from SEC of securities. You know, banks will be able to invest into cryptos, you know, and this is going to open the door for hedge funds, pension funds, you know, all sorts of you know, institutional money, which the market has been asking for. You know, institutional money players are already involved. You know, your exchanges like, you know, BATS, for example. We've also got NASDAQ, which will launch in Q1 2019. Everything you've witnessed this year is being pre-planned. The FUD, everything about it. And I just hope that during this time, you have all kept true to the vision of what you first originally saw with Ripple, and you've not allowed this manipulation to get the better of you. I know a few of my friends who I advised to buy didn't want nothing to do with Ripple when it was at 20 cents. You know, as soon as it started going up, as soon as it was showing them a portfolio, oh, they was banging on the door one by one, buying in at $2, $2.80, and they've seen the market reverse, come crashing down, and those people who did no research, no due diligence, I've just completely lost faith in the market, and do believe it is a pyramid scheme or a fad or a scam, an outright scam. But of course, everything we've been seeing in the media this year has been designed to give out that narrative, you know, and I just hope you've held, or you've sold and rebought backing lower. Would have been even better than holding, but I just hope people haven't completely left the positions due to, you know, mainstream media narrative. You know, we have to bear in mind it's all connected to the same thing, and the US dollar acting as the world reserve is a hinder upon America and emerging markets and across the globe, to be quite frank. You know, wars have been battled to keep the world reserve as the US dollar, but I think now it's in the best interest for not just the US but for the world to have this status removed and maybe put into a you know, if you follow me, I know, you know, I can't just say that I know, because you know, nobody knows, but it's like watching Coronation Street. If you're from the UK, you will know what Coronation Street is, and it is that scripted that clearly. You've got to be blind to not be able to see what is happening. You know, oh, Bitcoin's a scam, Bitcoin this, Bitcoin that, but you don't hear a lot about XRP. The reason being, so they've not played down XRP, they've never called it a scam, but there's a media blackout. There is 100% a media blackout on XRP at the moment. They don't want the word getting out. But I can assure you, once XRP goes live, and once we start over the new year, you will see this shit plastered everywhere. Absolutely. Because big boys who've been buying on the cheap have now got their load full, and they can make a profit off the everyday person again, and they'll probably crash down the market the exact same way. It's Wall Street 101, you have to remember that. But I've sort of gone a bit off our fucking topic here with that, but there's been some great developments. Again, like I say, Ryan Zigone at Congress, and you have to watch that video from Ryan Zigone. You know, he's put that, you know, very firm and very forceful. You know, he's not being nasty or anything like that. He's basically saying to Congress, you know, we need to act now if we want to remain relevant in this revolution. You know, the reason why the US did so well during the dot-com era, during the internet of information, and why we see the likes of Facebook and Google and Amazon, why they're all US-based firms, is because he had clear regulation, and he was able to innovate from that, design on top of those regulatory frameworks, and become the superpower of sort of the internet, if you want to call it. You know, it was sort of mainly a US thing at the time. You know, this is worldwide, and believe it, these nations, for example, Japan, you know, Thailand, they're not holding back for no one. In fact, they are at the back end, if not complete, with regulations. And I genuinely believe this 120-day executive order from the US president aimed at the Treasurer, with aid from JP Morgan. You know, we are going to see new financial laws, and I can guarantee you now these laws will allow banks, i.e. JP Morgan, you know, the likes of you know, venture capitalists, you know, fund managers like BlackRock, they will be able to use pension money, etc., and they'll be able to invest it into digital assets, whereas there is no law for that at the moment. It is illegal to do so, it is irresponsible to do so, but again, this is the thing that is going to make the US fall behind, and I think the message has finally kicked in, and sunk home, and Congress are asking the questions. The SEC, you know, they've done what they've needed to do this year. They've stepped out. You know, they said Bitcoin's a commodity, Ethereum's a commodity. Yet again, the silence with XRP, because we all know what the super weapon is, and what the ultimate digital asset is, and it is XRP. That will be media blackout. That's why I've not been seeing it as much. Yeah, you get the odd take from CNBC, but the way Ripple and XRP should be being covered, it's just clearly not being covered, and that's what you need to bear in mind. I'd like to think that most people watching this are intelligent. I'd like to think that, you know, the videos that we create for you are informative, for you to be able to make these sort of decisions. And moving forward, I shit you not, honestly, we are at the back end of the bear market. In my eyes, has finished. Yeah, of course, we're going to see corrections moving forward, but from now to the back end of 2019, we're going to see an absolute rip of a bull market for specifically what I'm talking about, XRP and Ripple, because they're going live on XRapid. Yeah, it might be a soft start to begin with, but as Brad Garnow has stated, one major bank will be using XRapid this year, as well as money providers. But you know, by the back end of 2019, he's talking in the magnitude of dozens. You know, dozens, it's being plural. You know, times 12, you can put that by a factor of 4. You know, it could be 48, 50 banks using it. Listen, the writing's on the fucking wall. I don't need to go and explain all this shit to you. I really don't. Just remember, you know, just remember what you've invested into. I'd like to congratulate everyone that's even watching this video, because if you have done, you've built your own awareness up for what is happening, and I'd like to think you're all well positioned, and I think we're going to have a great week this week after Swell. Whether the market takes a dump as, you know, buy the rumour, sell the news, I think we're going to hear a lot of banking institutions coming out singing the praises of digital assets now, rather than banks coming out saying they're not interested in digital assets. Remember, revolutionary technology we're talking about here, and technology doesn't leave no hostages behind. You know, when you talk about Metcalfe's law, we'll see the domino effect will be real. I can assure you, especially once XRapid's live. Banks have got payment flows running through XRP themselves. They've seen that cost saving. They've seen that they can actually, literally remove the Nostro accounts from other countries, because they can then use XRP as a form of liquidity to bridge. And you have to remember the likes of people like PayPal, you know, they're all operating over the old system, over the old sort of corresponding banking network, Nostro, Vostro. It's outdated, and it is about to be replaced. That's all I can say. It's designed in 1970. It's outdated. It pre-existed the internet, and we're living in a day now where instant payments, etc., instant everything is basically of high demand. And regardless of how powerful you are, you know, in regards to Swift 11,000 banking community, technology will always prevail, and it will always outdate something. Unfortunately for this, you know, Swift have come to an end, and they've served the purpose of the monetary system the way it's worked, and they've done a good job of it. But again, you know, we are 48 years into the future now, and it is time for change. I'm going to leave that video on this because I'm rambling on, but yeah, I can't wait to listen from Swell and see what we actually hear from that today. Take care, peace.